Hey y'all! Well, we're here today to review this Aiyima B07, which is a little different amp than the one most people have looked at, the A07, which I also reviewed. And this one is more geared towards 2.1 use with a powered, or a passive sub, not a powered sub. And it can be used with a powered sub, but the main thing you're buying with this is the ability to drive a passive sub, which not a lot of those out there, but some of you DIY guys may have built some sort of a passive sub box from Matty Sound or Parts Express or something, and you need an amp that will drive it and your main speakers. And you don't want to have to buy a separate mono amp to drive your sub or something like that. You're looking for all-in-one kind of solution, and that's what this is targeted towards. And I know the folks at Aiyima, at least I hope they realize that I'm mostly an audiophile channel, and we don't do home theater or video sound and that kind of thing. So yeah, we're going to be focused on the subjective review of this thing, comparing it in a audiophile stereo setup kind of setting. And so, yeah, let's open this thing up, look inside it, see what this thing's got, if there's any kind of upgrades or whatever we could do to it in the future. And then I'm going to hook this thing up to, I'm going to have to direct wire this to the driver on my active or powered sub. I've got an ELAC powered sub, so I'm going to have to pull the power supply out of it and, to access the actual driver so I can hook wires up to it to connect this thing. And that's one of the reasons it's taken a while for me to get the energy to review this, is it's taken quite a bit of work to just even set this thing up in my system. I didn't want to use it with the powered sub or the amp in the sub, because then you're not testing the amplifier and the power capabilities that are in this, which is the whole purpose for buying this. I know it's sounds like I'm talking in circles, so let's look at the inside of this thing. So we're going to look here at the inside of this little Aiyima B07 2.1 channel amp. And its claim to fame is it's got a powered sub out and a bunch of little subwoofer controls over here. And the difference with most of these is they have a sub out or an auxiliary out. This one has got powered sub or speaker jacks that will go to a passive sub or an unpowered, or a sub that doesn't have an amp in it. And then it's got a left and right channel, it's got Bluetooth, got an auxiliary in, it's got your RCA ins. So it's got a whole bunch of different inputs that you can use for it. And this would be really good to use with something like a TV, because you could hook it up to your Bluetooth or use auxiliary in if it's got just a speaker jack, or maybe with a computer, use it for gaming or something like that. And then it's got a kind of a confusing, I need to get this thing hooked up so I can actually see what these knobs are doing. This one's called the bass gain regulation knob, and this is the bass cutoff frequency, which we all know what that is. And then there's a bass volume knob. So you can control the subwoofer gain regulation, which maybe is the relationship for the main volume knob of the amplification to the sub versus the mains. So maybe if the sub's too loud at low volumes, but then it isn't loud enough at higher volumes, that this changes that ratio. It's the only thing I can think of that a regulation knob would do. And then it's got bass, treble, and your main volume knob. And yeah, to open this thing up, it's got a bunch of nuts on these volume control knobs you have to take off. And there's like screws that come in the side and 4 screws in the back. It doesn't have that normal little hex spacer thing in here. So this really wasn't made to open up like this, I don't believe, because there's no socketed op amps in here. So you would really have no reason to ever go inside this amp. And these are N5532 op amps all along this tone board. And I think there's a couple sprinkled around in this board too. And then the other thing that was kind of strange, I thought, it's got a 48 volt, and then it's got a extra, they call it an auxiliary power interface, used as power compensation when the power of the mains power supply is insufficient. And it's labeled VICE. And you can put in the comments below what that's all about. Anyway, yeah, like I said, this is not the kind of device that you would be opening up to swap out parts inside it. And so the fact that it's kind of a pain to open up is pretty irrelevant, because you guys will never be doing that, or the people using this would never be doing that. So anyway, let me put this little box back together, and it is going to be a little bit of a pain to review this thing because I don't have a passive sub. All I have is a powered sub, and so I'm going to have to open up my powered sub and unhook the speaker leads on the subwoofer driver, and then run a couple of speaker wires to it, because to test this, I feel like I really do need to, use these sub out jacks, the powered ones that are designed for a passive one. Because honestly, if you weren't going to be using this on a passive sub that has no controls or no electronics in it, I don't see why you would even be buying one of these things. So I want to make sure I test that, and I don't just use this normal auxiliary out like you would use off any of these other preamps that we've been looking at. So let me put this little box back together. Let me get my subwoofer modified. I'm going to hook this thing up. I'm going to listen to it with my topping DAC, and then we'll do the subjective part of this review. Okay, so now that we've looked inside it, what does this little thing sound like? And let me tell you kind of what I was comparing it to. The setup that I used down in my workshop area, I used my little 6BM8 amp, which doesn't have a ton of bass, so I have it hooked up to the ELAC powered sub, and then these R-51M clip speakers. Again, not a real bass heavy kind of a speaker given their little size and just their design, and so they really benefit from having the powered sub hooked up to them. And it has all the adjustments for the volume gain that it tracks with this. It's got high level inputs, so it works good with a tube amp. But you're not here to hear all that, but I just wanted to kind of give you an idea of what I tested this with. And also, I didn't hook this thing up to $2,000 speakers, because to me, the person that's going to be buying a $130 amp is not going to be hooking it up to $2,000 or $3,000 speakers. They're probably going to have some budget speakers too. And again, this is more geared towards working with a passive sub, which I'm not even sure anybody makes passive subs anymore. And so it would be a DIY build. Again, trying to save some money would be my guess. And so that's kind of what this seems like it's targeted towards. It does have a 48 volt 5 amp brick, which is what most of these little amps come with. And I know some of you are going to comment, well, if you put a 10 amp brick it would sound better. And again, I don't think somebody buying an amp at this price point is looking to spend $100 on an upgraded brick, which is what they sell for on Amazon for. And a lot of the people buying these things are getting them from Amazon. I mean, I'm sure you can get them from China Hi-Fi, or not China Hi-Fi, but, you know, AliExpress or whoever. But anyway, what does it sound like? It reminds me a lot of what the A07 sounded like out of the box before I put the Sparkos Op-Amps in it. It's got nice bass. The high end, if you give it a little treble boost, is okay. But the mid-range just, it's there, but it's just not sweet sounding. Obviously, you know, I like tube sound, and that, you know, I'm comparing it to kind of what that sounds like. But that A70 with the Sparkos Op-Amps sounded a lot more like this than this does. And unfortunately, if you're an audiophile, you can't change the op-amps in this thing, or you'd have to solder sockets in it for the surface mount things. And I don't think many people are going to go that deep into something like this just to be able to have this powered, amplified sub output. So, what is this thing good for? I did listen to some voice audio, like a YouTube reviewer talking through this system, and the voice sounded really good. And like I said, the music didn't have that rich sound that, as an audiophile, I'd like to hear. It does voice reproduction really good. And so what this feels like to me is a great little amp for like a desktop system on your computer, for like a gaming environment, where maybe you have even speakers a little smaller than these, and you have a smaller sub, and you're looking for something to power all that stuff. Or if you've got like a small home theater setup where you're not looking for a 5.1 with surround sound and all that mess, you're just looking for something to hook up a couple of inexpensive front speakers, and then you've built some kind of a, Parts Express subwoofer, trying to do this on a budget, trying to maybe get the whole thing together for under $300. This is perfect for that. And given that it's got a Bluetooth in, you can sync it to your TV via Bluetooth, and then you're all good to go. It's got RCA ins if you want to do an optical to some kind of little cheap inline DAC thing that has RCA outs. You could do that. Like I said, it comes with a power brick. It's got enough power. I think, these adjustments on the sub are really nice. It does feel like, from playing with it, that this knob on the left is like the gain or the ratio of the volume to the sub, so that you can adjust it at lower volumes to have more subwoofer volume, but then as you turn it up, it doesn't overpower you, and you're not constantly futzing with the sub volume. So, yeah, that's worth playing with. The downsides to me that I see that, kind of limit what this thing is usable for, one is there's no frequency markings on the frequency knob. It just says frequency, subwoofer frequency. I've got no idea what the crossover point is. And usually you're trying to target 80 hertz or 100 hertz or something, and you kind of know the frequency response of the speaker. And so, if you've done your homework, you know about where you want the sub to, turn off. The other thing, and I see that with a lot of these little devices where they have a frequency for the sub, it's not doing a high pass filter for the main speakers. So like when you're adjusting these subwoofer controls, it has zero impact on the frequencies that are going to the main speaker. And to me, especially if you're using smaller speakers like this, being able to offload the low frequency from these speakers and have the sub doing it, and then only send like 100 hertz and up to these would sweeten up the mid-range and really make the subwoofer system function the way it should. So I would rather see them do something where, like this subwoofer crossover volume, as you turn it up, it also turns up the maximum low frequency that these see. And, you know, give it a little overlap. But as you turn up the frequency on the sub crossover, it also turns up the frequency that these see. And I hope that makes sense. And it doesn't seem like that would be that difficult to do from an engineering standpoint. And then, you know, you could even have one of these knobs, instead of doing this gain thing, you could have it do like how wide that cross is to dial that in. But there's a pretty good formula for how wide you want that crossover point to be. And they could have this crossover point move like this with the frequency adjustment. And I think that would improve the sound of the whole system. So, yeah, this thing is kind of limited because you can't swap out the op-amps and you're just stuck with those, was it 5532 or N5532s, and that's just, it's going to sound like what those op-amps sound like. And there's no tunability as far as that goes. So I would say if you're like an audiophile and you're expecting this to be like the equal of that A70 with the Sparkos Op-Amps, yeah, it's not going to get there. And even this little cheap tube amp really just, as far as with music, it's just got a bigger sound stage and it's a lot sweeter sounding mid-range. So I would say this is more focused towards like a gaming computer kind of desktop setup, or if you got like a small home theater, or you just want to, maybe not even a theater, you just got a nice flat screen TV and you want to, you know, have some good sound with it. Step up from some little sound bar, get a couple of, you know, small bookshelf speakers, and get a passive sub, or build a little passive sub that's, you know, that fits your room, and then put this little guy to it and Bluetooth sync it to your TV. And I think that's kind of the spot that it occupies in the marketplace. So anyway, hope you enjoyed this little review. If you did, or like the way my video is, or whatever you, yeah, please subscribe. Please like the video. Thanks to all you Patreon supporters. Thanks to the manufacturers out there that send me stuff like this to review. I hope they appreciate my honest reviews. And hey, you know, if they make a rock star product, it's going to be a rock star review. And to me, this one just kind of misses the mark as far as being a audiophile product, and probably should be marketed more towards kind of budget home theater stuff. So anyway, we got more of this kind of stuff to review. I'm going to try to knock out a bunch of videos on this chip amp, preamp stuff, and get back to building some big tube amps. So until the next video, have a nice day.